Statues can't teach us history because we go to places where we're surrounded by them and we don't come away full of history. That's not their function. It's not something they're capable of doing, and it's not the thing they were created to do. Statues are there to validate and glorify the actions of supposedly great men. And sometimes our ancestors get it wrong. Sometimes they celebrate and they memorialize men who did terrible things. They do it because those men who do terrible things give them lots of money and want their reputations laundered. Sometimes the people they did those terrible things to are not people that we care about at that moment in history. There are all sorts of reasons why statues to men who did terrible things might be erected, but there's nothing wrong and there's nothing historically unusual about recognizing and reassessing and reappraising and asking ourselves a very simple question. Do we, not our ancestors, but do we feel comfortable validating and memorializing the actions of those men? Because it cannot be the case that once a statue is erected, that is it forever, and nothing that we might learn, no reassessment we might make, no new evidence that might be discovered can ever change things. And we've never felt like this in the past. We've always been willing to move statues. We've always been willing to reassess people. But this idea that statues are permanent, irrespective of what happens, irrespective of what we learn, I think is dangerous and it's novel. It's not happened in the past. And I think it's about to struggle over our history. Now, Colston was a slave trader. Colston did nothing else other than be a slave trader. He's not like Nelson, who did some good things, some remarkable things, the greatest military technician of his age, but was also a defender of slavery. There's two sides to that. Colston just sold human beings for money. That's it. There's no two sides to the ledger. Is he really somebody we want to celebrate in the 21st century? And his toppling has created this proper conversation where millions of people have come to understand that these arguments about statues being history, their removal involving the erasure of history, are not. They're false flags arguments. They're disingenuous arguments. Statues don't teach us history. We don't look to them to teach us history. Statues are about validation. And should we validate men who did terrible things? Colston was the deputy governor, the CEO of the biggest slave trading company in this country's history, the Royal Africa Company. He was complicit in the deaths of 19,000 human beings and the enslavement of 84,000 beings. Just honestly, is he really somebody we want to celebrate? And also, does his removal necessitate the erasure of history? Well, he's now in a museum where I suspect he will stay for the rest of his days. He's now surrounded by all sorts of information that was not available to somebody standing in front of his statue for 125 years between 1895 and 2020. He's now able, surrounded by that information, to tell a more honest story about the man he depicts, his involvement in slavery, how the statue came to be erected, the very strange story of how people 170 years after his death suddenly wanted to memorialize him. There he tells more history, not less history. So each statue needs to be taken on its own merit.